To save time, I will introduce the moderator for the next session. So, next up is a plenary session on the theme Synodal Church, Asian Model and Initiatives. The speakers of this session are Ms. Estella Padilla, Dr. Teresa Choi, Dr. Clarence Devadas, Professor Jeffrey Chang, and Dr. Ignatius Loyola Madhya Uttama. Professor Francis Tonepara will moderate this session. Hearty welcome to the speakers and moderators. Now, Professor Francis Tonepara, CMI, teaches church history and allied subjects at Dharmaram Vidyashetram. He was nominated as a member of the Pontifical Committee for Historical Sciences, Holy See, Vatican in 2019 for a period of 5 years. He is an active member of the Church History Association. The Association of the Catholic Historians of India. He was the president of Dharmaram Vidyashetram and provincial superior of the Carmelites of Mary Immaculate St. Thomas Province, Kozhikode. He authored and edited 14 books and more than 90 scientific articles. So, Francis, may I invite the moderator and also the speakers to the
Church, Asian Models and Initiatives. Please refer your handouts, page number 114. We have 5 speakers and the time allotted for each speaker is 12 minutes. The remaining time is for discussion. First speaker is Estella P. Padilla, a late theologian from Philippines, traveling all over the world, spreading the message of the Synodal Church, a participatory church in the world. She is a member of the Theological Commission of the General Secretariat for the Synod on Synodality. Padilla will share Salbong, a Filipino word, I suppose. Yes. Philippine Synodal experience. Salbong means Philippine Synodal experience. So, over to Estella.
Good morning, everyone, and we are grateful for this chance to participate in this global wisdom gathering. I'd like to use the first 5 minutes in a spontaneous way, and the rest of the minutes you can follow from what is written. I'd like to start with a video of the 3-minute video of the experience of the Philippine Church during the National Synodal Assembly. Okay. I wanted to start with it because I want to emphasize something. We were about 300 people, bishops, religious, lay, young people, from 86 dioceses of the Philippines. These are the bishops of Manila. They're saying, I see you. This is us starting the assembly with a dance to open the Word of God in our midst. Thank you. As you can see from the video, the synodal experience was a very cultural one, with a lot of dancing, singing, but also a lot of praying and respectful listening to one another. From the very start, we have asked the dioceses, the parishes, to start from their cultural appropriation of synodality. I give you one example from the southern part of the country. Next slide, please. So this is from the southern part, please. It's a, please, just, yeah. That's a, so that's a Habal Habal. It's from the southern part of the country. It's a single, thank you. It's a single motorcycle, 2 wheels, but this is expanded on the side to allow more people in. So really, it's the regular, ordinary public ride. It's the cheapest ride. And it's a beautiful symbol of journeying together, isn't it? But also of expanding the space of your tent. That's how people travel on a regular basis. So all symbols from the dioceses were brought out at the very start of the synodal process because we want to clarify, or we want to start by saying that the synodality is not a foreign idea. It's not coming from outside. It's already a lived reality in our own context. But the one that we used in the National Assembly is the image of the salubong. Literally, it means meeting one another. It is both a religious symbol, but also a cultural practice. It is the most popular Easter practice, when Jesus meets Mary on Easter morning. And when the black veil that covers Mary is lifted and she sees her son face to face, there's a thunderous applause, as if people themselves have met the Lord. And for us, that also describes the synodal experience for the Philippines. Salubong as a cultural practice has many nuances. So it means meeting one another on the road. It can have pagsalubong, which means to welcome each other joyfully. It can be salubungan, a meeting of hearts and minds when there are conflicts. And it can be pasalubong, a gift to be given when you return home. I think the use of cultural symbols made for an embodied communal discernment. We were discerning already from our common lived experience, religiously and contextually. And it provided enough trust in one another, especially when we have to face dark shadows or shadows in our church life. And it helped us, this common embodied experience, helped us to discern together and search for light together. All the diocesan cultural symbols of synodality were brought to the National Assembly, and it surrounded us. We were literally immersed in local synodal experiences all throughout the assembly. And I would like to emphasize that. So, the first one, pagsalubong, going out, from here on I follow the text. Pagsalubong, going out to welcome people, I think it describes, thank you. I think it describes the way the synod was accepted in all the parishes and dioceses, even if it was the time of the pandemic. But especially it described the way the parishes reached out to so many sectors. One parish described reaching out to 45 sectors, the very poor, single mothers, the children in conflict with the law, the policemen, the fisher folk, drivers, daily laborers, etc. No? We have regular parish and synodal assemblies as well as plenary and synods in the dioceses, but this one had the widest reach. The salubungan, meeting of hearts and minds, in the Philippines, when you have a conflict and you're able to sort it out, it means nagsalubong na kayo, salubungan. It describes the discernment process. I was very impressed with the small group discussion, 6 people on a table with a bishop, priest, religious, lay, young person. This circular dialogue going on and on. We change groups every day so that it is more diverse and you encounter people from different parts of the Philippines. We've had many shadows, of course, like yours. The church is for the rich, no hierarchicalism. Some actual quotes say, many are journeying together, but many more are left behind. Someone said, if we do not listen to the poor, are we really listening to God? And wide gaps were discovered. No gap between liturgy and social engagement, gap between social services and social transformation, etc. And when we discussed the sectoral issues, we used a method called look, listen, and love. No, not coming from a cerebral discussion, but from looking at actual stories and experiences of the different sectors, listening to God, and loving in action. That was the method used. And the mission, pasalubong, going home carrying a gift. Every Filipino who lives has a gift, and that describes our mission. Our mission is to be a corporate Christ, to intensely work on our national church vision to be a church of the poor through strengthening of our basic ecclesial communities. That is how we will live communion. And to make for authentic participation, we mentioned renewal of the clergy to transcend clericalism, to build up practices of stewardship, consensus building, and collegial decision-making, and to become more inclusive, politically engaged, participatory people of God. And lastly, to create liturgies of life, or sacraments of synodality. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Estella, for your beautiful and very impressive presentation. Thank you very much. Now, over to Teresa Choi. Now we go to Korea, South Korea. She teaches ecclesiology and sacramental theology, and recently she has published a book on synodality in Korean language, a highly contextualized theologian. She is accompanied by a Peritha, Catherine, so we can understand how important she is. So over to Teresa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your invitation in this conference. I read my presentation. In this presentation, the response of the Church in Korea to the request of the Universal Church for the synodality, and then the analysis of the synodality in the history of the Church in Korea will follow. Finally, suggestion for the realization of the synodality in the unique living context of Korea will be proposed, considering the challenges the Church in Korea faces in the past, present, and future. Part 1. The present response to the request for the synodality. Almost every diocese organized the synodal team and conducted the education and promotion for the synodality and synodal journey. The synodal meetings were convened in various groups in the parishes and were expanded to the whole parish and the whole diocese. Through the synodal journey of listening and dialogue, the voices of both the faithful and the pastors were collected and revealed the request for the renewed church in Korea. The most significant matter to the faithful was the experience of belonging to the church. They experience that they can actively speak up and be principal agents in the life of the church. Part 2, I try to find the examples of the synodal church in the history of the church in Korea. First, in the era of the foundation and persecution. One of the distinct features of the church in Korea is that the foundation was made by the Korean laymen without any priests, religious, or missionaries in 18th century. Some noble scholars studied the Catholic books in Chinese. They found the truths in those books, and their studies were developed the practice of faith. They sent the representatives to the Beijing to receive the baptism, and after they offered the baptism to each other and practiced the teaching of the church. These people developed the Catholic Church by themselves for 57 years until the French missionary came into Korea. When the missionary came, there were already about 5,000 baptized. And during the persecution continued nearly 100 years, tens of thousands of faithful were martyred, and many faithful ran to hide in the deep mountain. There, they lived their faith with the lay chairperson's leadership as a community of faith called Gyo-Ucheon. This history of the church in Korea left priceless heritage, such as seeking the truth voluntarily, embracing the truth with faith, practicing the faith, and living in a community of faith. In this heritage, we can see excellent realization of the essential spirit of synodality. Second, Inherens Vedicis Vaticani II. In 1984, the Church in Korea worked on an initiative for examining her present situation and seeking the direction for her future in the light of the Vatican II. The schema of the Pastoral Congress of Korea was one of the results from that initiative, and it was written for 4 years, and it was the very first time in the history of the church in Korea that the priests, religious, and laymen participate together on it. Schema listened to the people from the below and identified the current situation of each part, and then proposed the direction for the third centenary of the Catholic Church in Korea. In particular, the concern on the inculturation of faith and the attempt to build the missionary plans. Third point, the funeral tradition of the church in Korea. In Catholic Church in Korea, since the era of persecution, continues the voluntary participation of the faithful in the funeral. Currently, a parish organized called Yeolyeonghwe is in almost every parish. This organization has its purpose on the missionary works and service with prayer for deceased, participation in funeral rituals. Its work contributed significantly to the rebuilding the Catholic Church in Korea and the proclamation of the gospel. Its service and prayer are not only the voluntary practice of love by the faithful, but also the realization of communion in the concrete existence of human beings. First point, communal solidarity. In the history of the Catholic Church in Korea, the synodal life is clearly found in Gyo-Ucheon, which were built by the faithful during the persecution from 1830s. The faithful were firmly rooted in the faith and considered the study of faith and the life of communion as a crucial task. They gathered voluntarily to pray, and after communal prayers, they discussed the matters raised in the town about the living thing. After the Korean War, the parishioners gathered by regional districts and divided in small groups to pray, to study the Bible and catechism, and to share life's problems. And then from 1992 begins the small Christian community. Part 3, task of the Catholic Church in Korea towards the realization of synodality. Korea faces many challenges: indifference towards the transcendental and religious truths, the priority on the economic values, increase of relativism, rapid expansion of the individualism, many divisions among the members of the society between generation, genders, and social and economic status, expansion of new pseudo religions. Meanwhile, the strongest voice during the last synod was about the internal issues such as authoritarianism and the absence of communication between members and groups. The sharp criticism on the clericalism was strong as well, but the authoritarianism among the priests, religious, and lay leaders were noted as a problem. In this context, for the realization of synodality, the Church should start her first step from the lifestyle of the ecclesial communities in the past and face the challenges and seek the solution. To do this, the point below should be considered. First, the autonomy or spontaneity of the laity should be motivated and developed. This character is the most distinct feature of the Catholic faithful in Korea since the establishment of the Church in Korea, and it is also her impetus. Above all, the faithful need to experience the joy of Christian faith, and the pastoral method for this experience should be made. Furthermore, the multi-directional movement between the priest and faithful among the faithful is essential. Planning and working on the common text through the multi-directional communication is itself for synodality. At the same time, it is a way to promote the autonomy of the faithful. Second, it's necessary to strengthen the communal solidarity through the joy of living and working together. It will be best if the people can experience the beauty of the life and journey sharing. The Church needs to study how to be together within the concrete life of the people and how to lead them to the experience of faith. Third, the members of Church and ecclesial group should seek other point of reference to overcome the separation between groups and the absence of the communication. One of the crucial problems of the Church is the diverse separation. Just like a triangle, when two groups can see the same point, the third point, the point of reference becomes the third perspective to see themselves and each other, and thus the door of communication can be opened. Fourth, sharing the life among the faithful is another way to overcome the absence of communication and alienation. The firmness of Gyeocheon was due to not to sharing the faith, but also sharing life. For example, when the problem of young, the elderly, women, the disabled, LGBTQ, the diverse and remarried diverse do not remain as one's own, and when they are shared within the Church and considered in the community, the communal solidarity of life and of the faith community can be strengthened. The enhancement of solidarity through the sharing of life cannot be fulfilled by a pastor alone. The pastor has its unique role, but sharing the life can be more concrete when it's done by the one who actually lives that life. As the faithful in the past voluntarily shared their lives, every faithful and every pastor today should share their lives in their own way. For this, the formation of the laity is indispensable. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Teresa, for your presentation. Now we move on to Malaysia. Clarence Devadas is a diocesan priest of the Archdiocese of Kuala Lumpur, a moral theologian, associated with FABC for a long time and visiting faculty in many places, including Cambridge University, UK. He shares with us towards Synodal Church, Asian models and initiatives, Malaysia and Singapore. Over to you, Father.
Thank you, Father Francis. Good morning, everyone. Like many of you, let me just begin by echoing my sentiments of gratitude to the organizers for this opportunity and also this moment to share a little bit about the context of Malaysia and Singapore. In the interest of time, I'm just going to stick to the text that you can find on page 119. The call of Pope Francis to the Universal Church and also to all of us to a process of synodality is to be lauded, as he's inviting the Church to hear the voices of the people of God through a synodal process. The overall effort is to bring the Church together, to pray and discern what the Holy Spirit is saying at this point in history by listening to each other. This indeed captures the sense of walking together as members of the body of Christ towards the reign of God. pre-synodal experience. The process of listening to each other is not something new to the church, both in Malaysia and Singapore. Given the greater involvement of the laity in the life of the church, especially after the Second Vatican Council, listening, discerning, and moving together as a people of God has brought about vibrancy to the life of the church. What has facilitated the growth of this involvement, I would say, is the establishment of basic ecclesial communities, or also known as small Christian communities, 10 years after the conclusion of Second Vatican Council. The process of consultation is one that has been integral to the life of the church in Malaysia and Singapore. However, this form of consultation was very much clergy dependent. The ability to listen, discern, move is solely dependent on the disposition of the clergy, since the structure of the community is centered around the parish and the priest is the leader of the community. How has the church, the primary question is this, how has the church in Malaysia and Singapore responded to the process of synodality? I would like to address this with the following 3 questions. How was the invitation to participate in a synodal process received, both by clergy and laity? Number 2, what opportunities did this process provide the local church? And 3, what were the obstacles encountered? 1, reception of the synodal process. On the whole, there was an active participation on the part of the laity and clergy in the synod process. The initiatives and the efforts put by the respective dioceses were commendable. The initial responses, though not overwhelming, demonstrated a kind of groundswell never seen before towards such an extensive process. Despite the general welcome to give the responses, there was also a sense of hesitancy and doubt in certain quarters, both among clergy and laity. Surprisingly, there were skeptics among those within the church, and only some trusted the process or the institutional leadership to carry out the process that will bring about a change. It is also to be noted that there was a greater sense of pessimism among the clergy towards this process. This could be due to the length of the process or perhaps even some sense of despondency given the current situation that they find themselves in. Due to the lack of data, it is not possible to gauge the overall attitude towards this process except to only hear some voices among them. Number 2, opportunities of the synodal process. The synodal process provided the church in Malaysia and Singapore a sense of togetherness that brought the people of God comprising of peoples from all walks of life. The call to include the peoples in the peripheries provided the church with a sense of openness to listen, not just from people within the church or her leaders or the inner circles. The sense of openness provided the church with a new lens to view the life of the church in greater detail. For the vast majority of peoples, this was indeed a new process. Though they may have been coming to church for years, this sense of inclusiveness gave them a sense of belonging and perhaps also an opportunity to voice some of their concerns within and without the church. As the synodal conversations were slowly rolled out, the people who experienced it were full of praise for the process, and this then eventually required lesser push from the synodal committee. In some places, the synodal process was a breakthrough because for the first time, though the methodologies may have varied slightly, the entire diocese and also the Conference of Bishops had a method to create a safe space for the faithful, for faith and life conversations. The national conventions provided the opportunity for dioceses to see themselves not just one part of a whole, but also as one entity. The macro view of the life of the church will only augur well for the growth of the church. The national pre-synod gatherings afforded the church to listen to one another on a wider scale. If in the past the conversations were only at parish or diocesan levels, the national gatherings gave the people of God a better outlook of the challenges faced by the church and potentially find some common pathways to move together as one church. And so, on the whole, the process in itself, notwithstanding what the outcome may be, there was a sense of realization that the church belonged to the people of God, and the process of involvement may have provided a sense of hope that there will be changes in the near future, not only structurally, but also the outlook of the church. Number 3, obstacles to the synodal process. Given the diversity of cultures and languages found both in Malaysia and Singapore, it was not easy to communicate the synodal language in the vernacular languages. It was not just the local languages, but also of the other languages in the region due to the presence of migrants from neighboring countries. In short, the language used was rather difficult to understand, with unfamiliar terminologies and new procedures that made the process of listening a little more laborious. It was also noted that the indifferent attitude shown by the community leaders made it more difficult to obtain significant responses. Some of them were quick to dispose the process, and there were others who expressed low levels of trust, leading to obstacles in obtaining significant responses in the conversations. The process of funneling the responses from the grassroots raised concerns among some quarters. There were those who wondered whether their responses will actually get onto the final report. Given that the responses were varied and diverse, the process of discernment was something that must have been given priority for those who make the important decisions of what to retain or discard. Among the clergy who had reservations about this process, there seems to be an innate fear that their authority or relevancy may now be superseded by the laity. Though the process in itself was not directed in that way, the perception of having to listen to the voice of the people may have resulted in some of them thinking that their place in the church is under scrutiny. Since this is the first time that many have taken part in a process such as this in the church, there were those who used this opportunity also to air out personal grievances. The inability to look at issues in the church in a more holistic manner did not assist the process. Challenges ahead. The primary challenge is to make this synodal process a way of the church, the DNA of the church, in every aspect of the life of the church, in administrative procedures, in pastoral outlooks, even in juridical interpretations. The invitation of Pope Francis to this way of being church must not be limited to only this period, but be assimilated to being the essence of how the church must be. Otherwise, this may be seen as a passing fad with no lasting impact. For this to happen, there must be a change in the mindset at all levels, and not just for optics, but a sincere desire to listen to one another in an inclusive and dynamic way. The question is there a model? Perhaps it's too soon to have a model at this time, but I think the biblical image that has already been given to us of the disciples walking with Jesus to Emmaus is something that has to be developed in every level of the life of the church to address the current gaps found towards the current gaps that may prevent us from moving towards a synodal church. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you at the end of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Clarence. Now we go to Taiwan. A young, energetic Jeffrey is with us, Jeffrey Chang. He's Associate Professor of Dogmatic Theology, the vast Asian experience. He'll speak to us on synodality in Taiwan.
I wish I were as young as I looked. Every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. Synodality calls the earliest traditions of the church and also speaks of something new happening in the church. What treasures may be brought forth for Chinese-speaking Catholicism? As synodality emerged as an increasingly prominent theme for Pope Francis leading up to this synod on synodality, at least one salient question became increasingly unavoidable: how to translate the terms synodality, synodal, and synod into Chinese. Moreover, if the local churches in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, mainland China, Singapore, and elsewhere could concur on the same Chinese translation, that would be a desirable and fitting expression of synodal journeying together. Without delving too deeply into the linguistic challenges of Chinese, suffice to say, the noun, synod, as an event, synod of bishops, the adjective synodal, style or spirit, and the abstract noun synodality, denoting a concept, the relationship between these Chinese translations is not explicitly clear. And therefore, the talk about a meeting and the talk about a style of pastoral life does not often come to the fore. Historically, the translation of the early meetings of the church, as well as those of Eastern Catholicism, did not distinguish between synod, council, convention, and other types of ecclesial meetings. And therefore, trying to introduce distinctions in this time was not possible. In brief, for Chinese, the current synodality nomenclature is genuinely new, composed recently for present purposes with no explicit linguistic relation to ecclesial assemblies. In a Babel of languages, journeying together is not simple. Nevertheless, the Chinese-speaking church identifies relatively well with the importance of convening in assembly to express and realize the identity of church. Emergence of a Chinese local church made significant progress with convocation of the first plenary council of Shanghai in 1924. Although not a synod in name, the plenary council's General Assembly was preceded by 7 regional meetings in the preceding year. In 1967, the Archdiocese of Taipei convoked a diocesan synod for implementation of Vatican Council II. Similarly, Hong Kong convoked a diocesan convention, 1970-71, with active participation of clergy, religious, and laity. For Taiwan Catholics, the experience of 3 evangelization congresses provides significant background for understanding reception of the current synod on synodality. In 1988, Taiwan convoked an evangelization congress which was preceded by 4 years of extensive consultations with participation by clergy, religious, and laity, including representatives from Chinese-speaking Catholic communities throughout the world. Main priorities focused on lay identity and mission, communion, formation, and the signs of the times. In 2001, Taiwan Catholics convened another evangelization congress with a more modest 1-year plan focusing on new evangelization for Taiwan. Recently, Taiwan's 3rd evangelization congress was conducted in successive parish, diocesan, and national stages, 2019 to 2021. That multi-stage process preceded and even prefigured the current synodality process of the Synod of Bishops. Thus, the October 2021 opening of this synod encountered a local church in Taiwan which was familiar with some of the synodal processes, even if lacking a common nomenclature to identify those experiences. Clergy and lay leaders, in fact, even consciously refer back to the experience of the preceding 3 years in starting this synodal process, without denying, of course, that something new is emerging in the Church's synodal consciousness. Out of the treasury of Taiwan's past experiences of convening in assembly, there may be both old and new gifts offering insights into current synodality efforts. The following selected observations may or may not be relevant for other local churches. First, communion and mission. In principle, efforts to renew ecclesial structures and enliven faith life are integral to and constitutive of increase in evangelization and mission. Yet, tension has been encountered between church ad intra renewal and ad extra outreach. How much resources, including time, should be invested in faith life and structural reform before commensurate enhancement in evangelical activity may be expected? Surely internal restructuring and external outreach are intimately linked. But on a practical level, in our experience, on a practical level, the two do not necessarily progress simultaneously. For a synodal church, the pressing need for attention to communion, the character of our communion, and participation may unfortunately leave attention to mission for a later time. Second, power and participation. The church, at least, but certainly not only in Taiwan, has heard the call of Vatican II for increased lay participation and responsibility in the church's life and mission. Yet the church, at least, but certainly not only in Taiwan, continues to be characterized by clericalism. Ecclesial power is centrally concentrated, and culturally ingrained paternalism engenders an overly deferential attitude on the part of lay people, impeding efforts to increase participation and shared responsibility. This tension is obviously not easy to overcome. Even this well-intentioned call to synodality is instigated by papal initiative, for which we give thanks. Third, resolutions and results. Taiwan Catholics evince no shortage of ability to convene assemblies, make plans, and pass resolutions. The Church in Taiwan also does not lack ability to acknowledge sincerely that results remain limited. Ad intra, repeated calls to develop basic ecclesial communities have yielded modest results. Ad extra, resolutions to strengthen evangelization efforts and increase Catholic membership have yet to achieve new breakthroughs. Reasons are many. Brief and partial sharing is the most that is possible by way of conclusion to this presentation. Taiwan Catholicism acknowledges difficulties in sustained efforts to implement plans and resolutions. Sometimes official pronouncements may diverge substantially from actual situations or sentiments, eliciting responses that are dutiful but pro forma on the part of parishes and other ecclesial organizations. Sometimes current plans and initiatives are quickly overshadowed by subsequent movements and exhortations. For example, Taiwan's Third Evangelization Congress promulgated results in August 2021, which should have led to implementation. Nonetheless, in less than a month, by September 2021, Taiwan's limited ecclesial resources had turned to translation and introduction of synodality. What may follow synodality in 2024? The Gospel of Matthew reminds us, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." Even in this contemporary world, there seems to be an ongoing need for new initiatives. As we endeavor to journey moving forward together, hopefully the 2025 Pilgrimage of Hope Jubilee year may not set aside the current synodality efforts, but allow time for filling these plans with greater depth and greater creativity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Now we move to Indonesia. We have another Jesuit, Ignatius Medea Utama. He worked also in Philippines. He is having vast teaching and pastoral experiences, and at present he is both spiritual director and a seminary professor, a rare combination. He's an active member of the activities involved in the pastoral life of the church in Indonesia, and he is going to share on models of synodality of the church in Indonesia.
Thank you. Dear audience, good morning. I'm very grateful to be here with you to share some of the experiences of synodality in the Indonesian church. This paper is based on my personal experiences living in 2 dioceses in Java out of 35 dioceses in Indonesia. The reason is that I was born and raised in the Archdiocese of Semarang, and I spent 6 years serving the church in that diocese. And then I also spent 18 years in the Archdiocese of Jakarta, and out of those 16 years, I spent 13 years serving the church in the Archdiocese of Jakarta. The Synod on Synodality of the Church has already been taking place for more than a year. The preparatory document mentioned that the synodal path is rooted in the concrete life of the people of God. Furthermore, quoting the work of the International Theological Commission, it describes synodality as the specific modus vivendi et operandi of the church, the people of God, which reveals and gives substance to her being as a community when all the members journey together, gather in assembly, and take an active part in her evangelizing mission. This simple paper will describe how synodality has been practiced by Indonesian church through structure, leadership, as well as events and process, and how they positively responded to the call for building up a synodal church. To help members of the parishes to get to know one another more personally, and to participate in the life of the parish more effectively, the parishes are organized into small communities consisting of 20 to 40 families called lingkungan or basic ecclesial community. This practice started at a parish in Yogyakarta in 1941, and in 1980, all parishes in 7 dioceses in Java use similar structures. The lingkungan is described as a community of the faithful enkindled by the spirit of the gospel and fully involved in the life of the society. Members of the lingkungan gather once a week for around 2 hours. They pray together, sharing their faith based on scriptural readings, discuss issues they encounter in the lingkungan and in the society, and find solutions to solve the problems. Being mindful of their cultural context, they use the method of deliberation to arrive at consensus or musyawarah untuk mencapai mufakat in the decision-making process as well as in taking decision. Leadership in a parish is carried out not only by the pastor, but also by parish pastoral council. What is special about this council is that its membership are composed of the pastor, the assistant pastors, leaders of the lingkungans, leaders of several groups in the parish, including Catholic Mass Organization, such as Catholic Youth Organization, Association of the Indonesian Catholic Students, Indonesian Catholic Women Organization, and Association of the Catholic Scholars. This council adopts local wisdom, namely deliberation to arrive at consensus in the decision-making process, as well as in taking decisions on matters that are important for the life and mission of the parish, including vision and mission of the parish. Hence, the parish pastoral council is deliberative, not consultative. Excuse me. At the diocesan level, the presence of the diocesan pastoral council is a very significant form of leadership. The council is chaired by the Vicar General. Its members comprise of chairpersons and members of different commissions, both ordained and non-ordained. In the Archdiocese of Semarang and Jakarta, the main role of the council is to design 5-yearly guidelines for pastoral ministries of the diocese, which includes vision and mission of the diocese. The process of designing these guidelines starts from lingkungan, goes up to the parishes and deaneries, and culminates at the diocesan level. The process of the decision-making and taking decision using musyawarah untuk mencapai mufakat. It is good to know that these two different kinds of council were established in 1966, just 1 year after the closing of the Second Vatican Council. What is striking is the fact that the formulation of the guidelines for pastoral ministries of both dioceses always pay attention to the situation and the needs of the country. Hence, through the guidelines of pastoral ministries, these two dioceses always journey together with the whole nation and the country of Indonesia. At the national level, the synodality of the Church is clearly expressed in plenary assembly of the Indonesian Catholic Church. Until the year of 1995, the plenary assemblies were only attended by bishops and secretaries of the commissions of the Bishops' Conference. But in 1995, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the independence of the Republic of Indonesia, the bishops initiated a new tradition. They invited lay leaders and representatives from all dioceses and Catholic Mass Organization to attend thy meetings. This becomes the cradle of the birth and the cradle of the plenary assembly of the Indonesian Catholic Church, which is called Sidang Agung Gereja Katolik Indonesia, or abbreviated as SAKI, which convokes every 5 years. Due to the break of the COVID-19 pandemic, the assembly, which was planned to take place in 2020, was postponed to further notice. The process of this assembly is exactly the same with what Pope Francis asks us to do now. The main purpose of SAKI is to help the Indonesian Church to get more involved in dealing with social problems faced by the nation. Synodality also means journeying together with other churches. This is done especially by issuance of Christmas Joint Pastoral Letter when the Union of the Indonesian Protestant Churches and the Indonesian Bishop Conference responding to the institution of the nation and the country. The first joint Christmas Pastoral Letter was issued at Christmas 1980. For the synodality on the level of the lingkungan to take place, they need facilitators who understand the teaching of the church well and live them out in integrity. Unfortunately, not every pastor can and is willing to help them earn knowledge of the teachings of the church. In responding to this need, in 2014, I personally founded a community of catechists and pastoral lay leaders. This community gathered every month for 5 hours to study documents of the church. And within 8 years, we have studied Evangelii Gaudium, Lumen Gentium, Gaudium et Spes, social teachings of the church, and Gaudete et Exsultate. There are at least two main challenges lay ahead. First, more and more young people are not interested in attending the weekly gathering of the lingkungan. One among many reasons is that many old leaders of the lingkungan are not willing to hand over their leadership to younger generation. Creativity and innovation are also absent from their leadership, hence many young people find the gathering boring. Secondly, many lingkungan find it difficult to get new leaders. This due to the fact that many parishes do not offer continuous faith education for their parishioners and do not prepare their members to carry out leadership in the church. Actually, there is the third challenge, but since I don't put it in my paper, I will be happy to discuss it with you after this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Ignatius. I should say with full confidence that all the speakers were very respectable to the time factor, so I had no tension to control them. So all were very obedient. It's a new way of synodality. Thank you very much. Let us appreciate all our speakers and put our hands together and appreciate their hard work and their Now it is the time for discussions, questions, clarifications. Tell your name, try to be brief, don't go for a concurrent paper so that many get chances to intervene.
Can I ask? Start? Thank you. I'm Sister Joanna from Mumbai, Pauline Sisters. Thank you very much. And once again, I am happy to have listened to Southeast Asian angle of synodality, especially to Father Clarence and Estella, who I have already met in the past few months ago. And of course, today I also like to thank Jeffrey Chang because he was my chair yesterday for my concurrent session. Coming to the point, I like to address this question to Teresa Choi and to Father Jeffrey. The reason being that I have had experience of residential experience in both these places, and I would like to ask both of you the same question, because in Korea there is always the standing, the not threat I would say, but a shadow of North Korea, no? And in this synodal journey, what do you think are the prospects for your connection with the, I would say, vulnerable Christians of North Korea who are terribly persecuted? And Father Jeffrey, in the same context, having lived in Macau for 3 years and Taiwan for 6 months when I studied Chinese there, I know that there is hardly any connection between Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau for in various contexts, cultural, or even, they like some kind of a little bit of India-Pakistan issue. Not much, but. So what do you think in this synodal journey, sharing the language, both the countries, Korea, North Korea, South Korea, and Taiwan, which you share to some extent Mandarin. So how do you think can you help the synodal journey of the church in your connection with Hong Kong and Macau. And of course, I would not say the PRC. Thank you.
I'm Astrid from Mumbai. A couple of the presenters today mentioned mentioned evangelization, and I think Jeffrey, you specifically spoke of increasing Catholic, membership in the Catholic Church. So my question is, when we are talking about expanding the space of our tents, and we are talking of journeying together to build the kingdom of God, I guess we're also, all of us, I mean, most of the countries represented here, including the country including India, where I come from, the Catholics are in a very, very small minority. So when you are journeying together, and if you have this hidden agenda of increasing membership, what is your expectation, that you will encourage people to join the Catholic Church, or will you walk respectfully with them, respecting their own religions?
My name is Shekhar, Vincent Shekhar, a Jesuit from Madurai, India. I do not know whether this is the right question to raise here, but still I would like to address this question to the countries, representatives of these countries where Christianity and the church is a minority. I would like to ask this question, namely, whether this synodal gathering or the synodal activity in the last 1 year has made any impact or the raise of eyebrows to other people, that is the people of other faiths, or and whether there is a kind of a indirect or a direct support or antagonism from the government.
Before I translate her answer, can I make a point clear of sister? Did you ask about the Korean traditional faith and the other? I didn't get the point, so can you repeat the question, please? Thank you.
My question is that in the light of what we hear of North Korea, so how do you think the South Korean Catholics can help synodality in the Universal Church in your connection with North Korea?
I'll translate by sentence. So this is a very difficult question for us in South Korean.
실제로 북한에는 지금 그리스도교가 없다고 보고 있고, 한국에서 북한 선교를 위한 준비를 하고 있지만 현실적으로 실제로 옮기는 건 어려운 상황입니다.
Actually, we see that there is no Christianity left in the North Korea, and we are preparing for mission to have a missionary priest to the North Korea, but it's to put into practice is very difficult for now.
지금 당장 무엇을 하기는 어렵겠지만은 나중에 통일이 될 거라고 기대를 또 희망을 갖고 있고, 그때를 위한 준비를 지금부터 해야 한다고 보고 있습니다.
So the Catholic Church in South Korea thinks it will be really difficult, but in one day will success in the unification of the Korea, both Korea, and then we are preparing for that time now. Yeah.
시뮬리티라고 하는 거는 가장 중요한 거는 삶의 자리에서 출발해야 되는 거기 때문에 지금부터 저희가 해야 될 것 중에 하나도 북한의 여러 가지 상황들을 이해하고, 그리고 그것에 맞게 준비하는 것이라고 생각을 하고, 이러한 우리의 노력이 우리와 같은 생각을 갖지 않은 사람들과 함께 가는 방법, 즉 시나리타스를 실현하는 걸 보기 때문에 저는 이것도 여전히 보편교회에 기여하는 거라고 생각합니다.
When we put the synodality into practice, I think the place of living is very important. So from now, now we are preparing to understand what the situation in the North Korea is now, and it will be. And then when we meet the time that we can do the mission in the North Korea, then we have to deal with the people who thinks differently with us and lives differently with us. And this is about the theme of the synodality. So when we get to the unification of the whole Korean Peninsula, then we will contribute to the universal church that we to the synodal journey.
Jeffrey can complement, and also with the Chinese background.
I beg to clarify regarding the relationship between the Chinese-speaking local churches. My ecclesiastical faculty of theology in Taiwan has students from Hong Kong, Macau, mainland China, and Singapore. They come together and study together. Regarding the issue of translation, in our preparation for translation of the synodality documents, we were also in constant communication, at least with Hong Kong. Macau is considerably smaller, and mainland China was in the midst of COVID. I think they still are. But nonetheless, in our discussions of how to translate, one of my points was that we should select a translation that would also be more easily understood for the particular social situation in mainland China. And therefore, although we miss the linguistic connection to the Eastern councils and the early councils of the church, which were called synods, or even the Second Vatican Council that also called itself a synod, we did, for one of the words that we came up with, there's a connection to communion ecclesiology, which I thought was rather helpful. So we do communicate on the level of ecclesiastical translations and also theological education and also our various publications. Turning to the second question, if I may, on evangelization. Evangelization is more than simply making converts, and expanding the space of our tents is more than bringing more people in as members, but rather remembering that the homeless, the poor, and the disadvantaged are also part of our social concern. I know this doesn't really answer your question, but I just want to make the clarification. In most of our countries in Asia, aside from beloved Philippines, where I worked for several years in Timor-Leste, we Christians are a small minority. Therefore, our relationships journeying with society is an important part of our mission. It always has been. It has to be. I realize that in Europe and maybe North America, interreligious dialogue is something that you need to go out to. It's very exotic and exciting maybe. But here, at least in Taiwan, many of our Catholics are maybe the only Catholic member of their family. Interreligious dialogue of life, begins as soon as they wake up and turn over in bed. Reaching out and evangelizing takes place at this level. I will move quickly to the third question, lest I monopolize the time. Synodality has not raised any questions on the part of other faith groups in Taiwan, maybe because they haven't heard us talk about it. And the government, we enjoy religious freedom where the government allows us space to do whatever we can and also welcomes our participation in social development.
Just to answer the third question about whether the synodal process has raised eyebrows amongst people of other faiths and whether there's antagonism from the government. To the first part, I think peoples of other faiths, if you're referring to people, Muslims, Hindus, not really. It hasn't raised much eyebrows. As Jeff said, probably we haven't spoken much about it. But there's a little bit of a conversation in ecumenical settings with other Christians. They are quite impressed with the process and they keep asking, at least from my conversations, what is this all about and how is it being translated locally and also internationally. In terms of the government, I think they are quite indifferent to this process. As long as we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about the present government in that sense, they're quite silent about it. So in Malaysia, Christians are only about 10%, predominantly 60%, at least from the official statistics, are Muslims. We are not an Islamic country. We are a country with a diversity of religion. So there's a little bit of autonomy for the different religions on certain matters in managing their own faiths, and in some other matters a little bit more controlled. Whether Indonesia is a similar situation.
Yeah, I think what I want to say has been mentioned by Jeff and Clarence. Just to add that the Muslims have been familiar with this gathering, especially since 1995, because the plenary assembly of the conference always use public buildings, and so they know what's going on. And in relation to the government, especially in this present government, is very supportive to every different religions in the country. So there is no problem at all. Thank you.
Answer, as you well know, we are predominantly Catholic, but a lot of the dioceses reported reaching out to and consulting peoples of other faiths. We have 10% Muslims and a few percentage of Buddhists and Hindus. No? And in one diocese, in their diocesan assembly, all those who were consulted gathered in the center. So there were Catholics, there were Muslims, there were very poor people, LGBTQ, etc. And since the diocese did that, it was followed through in the different parish parish synodal assemblies.
Thank you. We may take up 3 more questions, then with that we conclude.
Okay, George from Kenya. A note of gratitude to the presenters, to Ms. Padilla, Father Clarence, and Father Ignatius Loyola. The first question is to Ms. Padilla about the use of symbols. It's a very good creativity, and I commend that. But I think we need the hermeneutic of symbols, because the assumption is that we have a literate society that can understand symbols. And so are you assuming that your audience is literate? All, if not, aren't you including the simple, ordinary people that we are trying to reach? To Father Clarence and Father Ignatius, the question is related. It appears that the small Christian communities, the ecclesiastical communities, these are the basic communities, which is the greatest creativity of Vatican II, seem not to work. Father Clarence has made it clear that that is not the case, while Father Ignatius started by actually using it as a very good pedagogy, but at the end you said it's a challenge. I'm worried because now that we are in synodality, we are very excited and very creative. How then do we really rekindle the small Christian communities, which for me I think is the best way of reaching the ordinary?
Good morning, my name is Joy from the Philippines. I would like to commend all the presentations in the way that you expressed that synodality has already been present in the local culture as well as in the local churches that you represent. My question is, what is the impact of this synodal process? Are there new practices, new structures, new ways of being church that have emerged in the interim now, from the initial phase up to now? You might want to share some of these insights so that we can learn from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. My question might go to Francis, the moderator himself. My question may be probably addressed to you. It's an observation.
Moderator is not allowed to answer questions.
Yes. Of a certain word, vocabulary that we are using. It appeared yesterday and today also, all because it's captured in the Vatican document somewhere there, and the word is tent. The tent. enlarging your space of the tent and whatever. That was so sensitive, especially for those of us who live among the poor people, people who are homeless. They have no homes, that's why tents are pitched for them. Those who are refugees, they live in tents. Meanwhile, we have a very strong vocabulary in the scriptures, the house of God. Come home. Rather than using the tent, when the Israel people were living in the tent, God, I heard word is coming from Isaiah, they had not yet reached home yet. They were also displaced because of war and the rest. Now, with this kind of movement, I don't think you are going to live in tents anymore. Those who are living in tents are living in situations which are not credible, which are not good, which are not so normal, but they have no means. And so I plead that all of us here, as we are thinking of working together, we are all working to the Father's house. We are going home, not to live in tent. Thank you.
It's very difficult for me to be in a conference like this. I'm usually not invited to, religious conferences, but because of Father Saji and his encouragement, I am forced to be here. So I've had, 16 versions of my presentation, which I did yesterday, which were audited, 2 dry runs, and a lot of things to make it. And one of the things these people told me, and I made a rule, don't be offensive, stick to the scripture, but make your message unambiguous. Nobody should doubt what your message is. And I've been having problems with this. Now I want to tell, I like the presentations very much, especially the dancing bishops, to get the bishops to dance. And it was very interesting, but we see 12 bishops out of maybe about 150 to 200 bishops in Philippines, which means less than 10%, 6 to 10%. And that is what we are projecting, that the whole community is together. There are no factions among bishops. So it's very important for us to also show the other side of the story, because if we are giving only the positive sides, then we don't hit reality. We should give the other side with facts and figures. And in my dry runs, where there were rectors of seminaries, they all said, what you're saying is very true, but tell us the nice things about what we are doing. And the laity who were there said, you're saying the same thing that we wanted to say, but we didn't say in the Synod. So we are having a problem of lack of project. The second problem is there are no figures being given. That we are to be synodal, yes, we should try and do this, we should want. So I'll give you one example. Because of the
Alan,
yeah.
Please be short.
Okay.
Focus on
We
question.
found out that the women wanted to be empowered. So I took up one action of Pope Francis's modification of Canon Law 230, which is acolytes. And none of the women knew about it, the priests didn't know, and the bishops didn't know. And when I took it up, I said, I'll make 10 women in positions. It did not happen because the bishops didn't cooperate.
What is your question?
My question is, how do we make something happen without synodality?
Okay, clear.
In communities. So the way Ignatius and I saw, probably we look at the same reality. One saw the glass as half full, one saw the glass as half empty. So it depends on how we look at it. Now, with regard to small Christian communities, in answer to your question, that is the very base of the church, at least in Malaysia. That has been, since Vatican II, that has been the heart of the parish, small Christian communities. Yes, I do agree there are many challenges, like what Ignatius mentioned. The young people are not attracted to it. But perhaps there needs to be a remodeling of what a small Christian community is all about. Very often, we talk about, at least in my context, small Christian communities are nurtured on geographical grounds where you live. And I think one of the things that we have learned in the pandemic is that now we can also form small Christian communities virtually, and also by interest groups. So I think that the thinking of small Christian communities, how it started 40 years ago, has to be rethought, how we want to make. But the community aspect is very important. Maybe for the young people, coming together once a month, reading the gospel is not attractive, but what can we offer them to a life of a communal life in that sense? So I think that's the thing I wanted to say, that a rethinking of how to build this community. In my own country, I always say this, is that, even though the numbers are small, we have about 600 small communities. And you say that even if 10 people meet a month, that's 6,000 people meeting a month. There's no other organization in the church that meets every month 6,000 people. Your Vincent de Paul, your liturgical committee, there isn't one. So it's the strength of our local church.
Especially to attract young people, at least there are two efforts needs to be done. First of all, giving them space to create communities based on group interests. Secondly, the Indonesian churches started to involve them in the leadership position in the church. In parishes, the parish pastoral councils, one of the members are young people, and that also starts in the diocesan level. So those are two efforts to invite young people to get involved. And I agree with Clarence what he has been saying.
Just note on the symbols, hermeneutics of symbols, and the question about illiterate or illiterate people. These symbols did not come from us. They came from the local churches, and they are embodied, they are lived. So the hermeneutics is an embodied or lived one. So that's it. In terms of basic ecclesial communities, the call again to move from basic ecclesial communities to basic human communities have been sounded off at the recent FABC General Assembly. And in the Philippines, from basic human communities to ecological communities have already been sounded. In terms of actual change, I think there's no going back from the synodal process experience. Every time there's a meeting in the parish or diocese, people will say synodal, synodal, that means sectoral representation. And every time there's an issue, people would say listening, listening. We notice a lot of dioceses are using the synodal results for pastoral planning. So I think it will follow. There is no going back. We can only move forward, especially in terms of structural change.
When the Continental Stage working document came out with the theme "Enlarge the Space in Your Tent," I had two immediate responses. The first was very impressed with their ability to delve into the prophet Isaiah, a not very well-known phrase. But the biblical background and the current realities remind us that symbols are interpreted contextually. In the Old Testament, the Lord pitched his tent and dwelt among us. And so therefore the image of tent is about God who dwells with God's people. It also pertains to people on the move. And if that image is not appropriate to your local context, I would suggest using another. I mentioned I had two responses when I saw the working document. That my second response was, this year I need to make my nativity scene with a tent over it. Because the images, the metaphors, the created language which we use as a human people are all inadequate for expressing the uncreated grace that God desires to give to us. And therefore, to grasp onto particular words is to fall into the danger of missing the grace that God is calling to us to. And therefore, I think that's all the time that I have to say. And if you have more questions about the Continental Working Group, we have people here who are on that committee. Thank you very much.
Once again, I thank all the speakers and also the participants and also those who have intervened very actively. I thank each and every one of you for your active participation. Thank you very much.
May I express our gratitude to Professor Francis Tonipara, the moderator of this session, for doing an exceptional job. May I also thank the speakers for their enlightening presentations and also valuable contributions to this conference.